Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for Tuesday, the 1st of September, 2015. Hope you're doing well this afternoon. Let's take a look at what's going on in the tropics. We have Fred out here leaving the Cape Verde Islands after an historic moment yesterday, being one of only a couple of hurricanes to impact this region over the past 100 plus years, and pretty remarkable. It came off Africa and developed into a hurricane rather quickly, and then passed through some of these islands in here. It had a very small area of hurricane force winds, and so the impacts were, really over a small area, so to speak. But for them, it was a high impact event. Fred will definitely be the Cape Verde Islands. It only takes one poster child for this year. And then we have the leftovers here of Erica, believe it or not, in the Gulf of Mexico. And then if we look at the next 5 days, a couple of areas, including this system here, which is the remnants of Erica. But then the potential for something to come off of Africa, very low potential at that, only 10% over the next 5 days. So let's take a look at really the only area of interest. Decent area of convection here in the western Gulf, raining a little bit, kind of stormy in the Houston metro area, down towards Galveston, and then this extends out into the Gulf of Mexico. No indications whatsoever that this will develop into anything to worry about. And then this is the region that's the leftover circulation, a little bit of a circulation and surface trough associated with Erica, which was supposed to be up here, according to some of the computer models, as a very powerful hurricane. So obviously not going to happen. But you can see it's got a little bit of a curve to it. Really not going to do anything except bring some more heavy rain to areas that kind of don't need it through here, and even up in the northern Florida, southeast Georgia. Very heavy rain associated with this system, as you can see on this beautiful wide radar shot from the National Weather Service. Large area of rainfall over the northeastern Gulf. So folks in Cedar Key, down towards maybe the I-4 corridor headed up towards Orlando, but really up I-75 and Lake City, across Interstate 10 here. This region could get soaked pretty good over the next day to day and a half as the remnants of Erica move in, and then heavier rain sitting over the northwest Gulf, drenching the Houston area right now, especially right over Galveston Bay. Houston sits just a little bit offset from that region, just a little bit. It's not right on top of the bay, but a lot of people live in this region, that's for sure. And very heavy rainfall once again in that area, but nothing tropical. So what's going on out there? I posted in my blog on the site today that I didn't think anything would be happening over the next several days. So we're going to have kind of a downturn in activity after the recent pulse that gave us Danny, Erica, and Fred. And all three of those systems developed in what we call the main development region of the deep tropics. Two of those systems became hurricanes. Fred, obviously, yesterday, and then two before that. Danny was a major hurricane out in this region. Well, one of the inhibiting factors for a good deal of pretty much any hurricane season is the Saharan air layer. You get this pretty strong jet that comes off of Africa in the mid-levels, and it kicks up a tremendous amount of dry, stable air coming off the Sahara. It's got particulate matter in it, silicate, sand, dust, whatever you want to call it, and that's termed as a sort of a scientific process called the Saharan air layer, and that is bad for hurricane development. And you remember I showed you this before, and if you haven't seen it before, just imagine that you have a real large blanket of this just sitting out over the Atlantic here in the mid part of the season, especially in July, where it's just all red and orange and nothing happens. Well, now that we're in September, the Saharan air layer becomes much less of an inhibiting factor. And if we look at the scale, any SAL, S-A-L, that we do have out there is on the lower end of the scale over here, and except way up here into the Canaries. But this doesn't matter. It's really through this region here, the main development area, that we look at. And there is some Saharan air, dry air at the mid-levels sitting out in the mid part of the Atlantic, but it really doesn't matter right now because we don't have anything trying to develop. And so what I'm getting at is the Saharan air influence is going to be less and less through the rest of the season. It's going to come down to more of this shear. So you can have an absence of Saharan air. You can have very warm water temperatures, which we do across most of the Atlantic basin. But if the upper level winds aren't favorable, none of those other two things matter. You can have a very unstable air mass, lots of moisture, high humidity values, little Saharan air, very warm water temperatures, all these ingredients. And if you have strong upper level winds cutting across the tropics, then you don't get development. And another way to look at it, you're going to bake the perfect wedding cake, and you have everything you need except that one key ingredient, whatever it may be. And in this case, it might be the icing. So you've got this great cake, but oh man, for whatever reason, there's no icing. And so the wedding cake isn't going to be a wedding cake. It's going to be rather, ready for the trash can, basically. And that's the same kind of thing here. You have these ingredients, you say, wow, man, everything's there for the makings of a big hurricane, but one ingredient off, and in this case, upper level winds, and you don't have anything. You get a big fat zero. So if you leave the icing off the wedding cake, you don't have a beautiful wedding cake. And if you have strong shear, like you see here, and I'm going to draw over it in red, this is just deadly for hurricane formation. I mean, it's going to just cut the tops off. And so anything moving west into this shear zone is going to just be decapitated. And so this is the missing ingredient right now. Cyclonic flow for the most part here. Big tropical upper tropospheric trough just sandwiched in here. Cyclonic flow, sinking air, no good for development. By the way, had Erica come up into the western Atlantic here, what would the upper level winds have been like? Remember all those models that were saying for a time that it was going to come up through the Bahamas and then up through here like this and maybe be a very strong hurricane off the Carolinas? Well, the upper level winds, if we look, would have been, looks to me like about 20 knots right in here, and not quite very favorable. A little bit in here. So I guess it just wasn't meant to be. The best upper level wind dynamics is in just a very small area to the west of Tampa, maybe down towards the Yucatan, but that's about it. So Erica never had a shot. But until this, and if it ever goes away, until this goes away and if it goes away, we're not going to have any development to speak of in the Atlantic. And I believe it's going to be almost impossible for something to get going out here and get all the way across intact. We're going to have something come through, and these winds through here weaken just a little bit, and this system struggles and then tries to blossom up towards the southern Gulf of Mexico, or maybe the northwest Bahamas, which is what the models were trying to do with Erica. It just couldn't quite do it. So we'll keep our eyes out for that. This is interesting. The equatorial temperature anomaly subsurface map that I have been showing quite often, it shows the El Nino. This is kind of like a CAT scan of the ocean, where you get to see down into the depths. This is the surface here. This is 450 meters deep, and this would represent the eastern Pacific, and this is the western Pacific over here. And again, you're going down through the ocean like a slice, if you will, to show the anomalies in one section of the ocean. So clearly everything in here is warm, on the warm side of the anomaly chart over here. And centered in the middle is this very warm blob. People have been calling it that. It's not really a blob. It's just a large area outlined with what we call isotherms, or lines of equal temperature, that makes it look like a blob. But whatever. People like to use sensational terminology because it makes for better headlines. The big red blob in the Pacific, blah, blah, blah. It's just a warm anomaly, very warm. But I tell you, you can look at a few things here clearly. Look at that. What about the blue blob? You have the red and the orange blob, but no mention of the blue blob, of course, because that doesn't create as much havoc as the El Nino does. But we are starting to cool. In fact, from, let's see here, where are we? 180, 160 east. So this would be about 170 degrees east longitude. from there west, I know that's confusing, except for this one little area, is either at or below average. So in the western Pacific, there is no El Nino. It's all centered in the eastern Pacific. And then you got this one little thing here trying to nose in, cooling off right there in the Nino 1 and 2 areas, they call it. Now the bottom line is this will be with us for a little bit, and then it looks like it's going to really start to fade next year, and that'll be that. And you can already see that starting to happen with this area in the western Pacific cooling off, and we'll start to see that break up through here. And by next hurricane season, this will be gone, and we'll have a totally different season on our hands next year. You'll see. But what about this year? The next couple of weeks? Well, until we get rid of that shear zone, nothing much is going to happen. And one of the things that helps to get rid of that shear is a change in the upper level pattern. And the GFS and its ensembles here over the next 2 weeks, forecasting the MJO currently kind of non-discernible, but then it's supposed to amplify just a little bit into phases 8 and 1, which typically brings the Western Hemisphere a better pattern for development. And believe it or not, the Euro agrees with that scenario. A rare instance where both models are very similar in their evolution. They're not going to be right on top of each other. That'll never happen. At least I don't think so. But both of them generally have an amplification that's noticeable of the Madden-Julian oscillation. And basically what that means is we would see a large anticyclone develop in the Western Hemisphere instead of these little tiny areas of favorable winds. So you see this little small 5 and 10 knot region, light shear. Well, the MJO coming in would give us a much larger area of lighter winds, cutting off some of this cyclonic flow, maybe pinching it off and sending it off to the northeast a little bit, and you'd just be left with these upper level lows with these big high pressure areas around them. That would be more favorable for development. So we shall see what we shall see. All right, if you're watching on YouTube, as they say, please subscribe for future video updates. And of course, we do have everything we produce going into our app, Hurricane Impact, on the App Store and at Google Play. So just wanted to remind you of that. Otherwise, that's it. Tropics will probably be quiet for a few days, so I'll take a couple of days off from doing video blogs. I'll keep posting stuff on the site, and when things pick up again, and they will, we'll jump right back in with more in-depth video discussions as needed. All right, so have a good rest of your Tuesday, and I'll touch base again with a video discussion before the end of the week, probably Thursday or Friday, something like that, and we'll see what's cooking. Until then, have a good one. I'm Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. Talk to you later on.